Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, back with the Dark Shadows video for you guys and gals. And what am I talking about today? Our buddy Barnabas. Played by actor Jonathan Fred in the original series. So what am I going to discuss here? Barnabas the Risk Taker, why not? And no, not just as a vampire, because that would be simple, though I'm going to get into that. Remember, this guy started off as a mortal man, and he does take risk. No, I'm not just talking about the duel with Jeremiah. I'm more talking about the time he hides Victoria Winters from Reverend Trask. He is taking a risk in a lot of ways. Keep in mind, Vicky is being basically hunted down and going to be arrested by Reverend Trask because he thinks, well, she's a witch, and he wants to put her on trial for all this. Barnabas doesn't want that. Hell, even Lieutenant Forbes doesn't want that. So Barnabas, who employs his friend, Lieutenant Forbes, to help him, and the two of them do. Both of them are taking a risk. I would say more Lieutenant Forbes than Barnabas here, because again, Barnabas is a Collins. His name does mean something, and more specifically, his father's name means something. So, but though, I do feel Barnabas is taking a risk here, because with Joshua, you gotta understand, Joshua could be a complete dick. And I love Lewis Edmonds for playing him this way. Would Lewis Edmonds, Joshua, have turned on Barnabas? No, not necessarily for that, but keep in mind he's not too happy when Barnabas marries a servant girl named Angelique, right? Joshua's never happy. Sort of. So Barnabas does take a risk by hiding Victoria Winters. And really, I got to give a lot of credit to Laura Parker for the way she sabotages Victoria Winters, her character Angelique, for the way her and the writers sabotage Victoria Winters into getting her into Reverend Trask's arms. Barnabas and Angelique get married, and Angelique, who knows Victoria Winters, is staying in the old house with her and Barnabas. Keep in mind, Naomi Collins, Barnabas' mother, gives Barnabas and Angelique the old house as a wedding gift. The old house was in Naomi's name. She passes it to Barnabas as a wedding present. Well, Barnabas and Angelique as a wedding present, which is one of the, again, as Christine Pearson Caratilles from Between the Shadows have said, shout out to them, link to their channel will be in the description box, have said Naomi was really the only one nice to Angelique, which is why Elizabeth doesn't incur Angelique's wrath in the future, at least not for a while. But that being said, Vicky is in the old house. Angelique knows she's there, and she performs a spell that summons fire that doesn't burn her. Fire of ice, I think she says. And Angelique is in her old room, her servant's room. She's not in the master bedroom where her and Barnabas sleep. Oh, no, no, no. And Barnabas is actually walking by the servants' quarters, and he hears Angelique do this. He's not sure. He's like, wait, Angelique, is that you? Sort of moment. And so what happens next is Vicky sees fire. She runs out into Reverend Trask's arms. Now, Barnabas is even going to take a more of a risk, and now that Vicky has run into Reverend Trask's arms, and he's caught her, as he says, I've caught the witch, I've caught the witch, and he takes her into custody. Now, what you have happen next is really interesting, because I've often talked about the difference between Phyllis Wick and Victoria Winters, more specifically their journeys in 1795. And I'm going to get into that here too. So, that being said, keep in mind, Barnabas, when this happens, when Victoria Winters runs into Reverend Trask's arms, Barnabas is still a mortal man. He is not a vampire yet. So Victoria Winters is not in the house when Barnabas is bitten by the vampire bat. She's not in the house when he's laying in bed dying. She's not in the old house. She's in jail. Because keep in mind, there's that meeting with Barnabas and the initial attorney before Peter Bradford steps up and becomes the attorney. That Barnabas is there for with the one guy. He's like, I'll defend you. I'll prove Reverend Trask is a charlatan. It's a guy who ends up being one of the judges, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But that being said, he can't defend her because she goes, well, I am from the future. Vicky, though she has lied, is usually a preferable of honesty. She doesn't love lying unless she absolutely has to save her life. Now, she's had to lie throughout 1795. Now, she's not a witch. That's not her lying. That's not a lie. But Barnabas is basically, look, if you tell these people from the future, they're going to put you on a gallows, and Vicky knows that too. So she does she doesn't want to lie about it anymore because Vicky does not like lying. So that being said, you have Victoria Winters, who's about to be put on trial. So she's not in the old house. The difference is Phyllis Wick, and I've talked about this before, and again, I'm going to get this all leads back to the risk taking of Barnabas. Because again, Barnabas is wanting to defend Vicky. Barnabas isn't going to get the chance to defend Vicky. The same way he did not get a chance to defend Phyllis Wick. The difference, I would say, is Barnabas at least met with an attorney for Victoria Winters. I don't believe he got a chance for Phyllis Wick because Phyllis Wick was not taken into custody until Barnabas's coffin was carried to the mausoleum, meaning after he was bitten, after he died, and then when she's in jail, he resurrects. So that being said, Barnabas would not have gotten a chance to meet with an attorney for Phyllis Wick. He probably wanted to defend. He probably would have defended her the same way he wanted to defend Victoria Winters. Now, where is Barnabas as a risk taker as a vampire? I think I've explained very well enough. He was a risk taker as a man. It begins with not just getting let out the coffin. That it begins with meeting Elizabeth, because you have to now find a way to at least not necessarily twist history, but suggest, hey, history might not exactly be the way it's written in the Collins Family History book. And I love what the writers and Jonathan Frid do here. And yeah, it's the writers writing it, but he's delivering it, and Joan Bennett's selling it too. Barnabas says, considering communications of in those days, that history didn't tell of his marriage, and my father, who would be his great grandfather, and he goes through the whole thing. So it's recorded in the history books, as Joshua wrote it, wanted it written, that Barnabas went to England and died. Now, did Barnabas go to England? No. Did Barnabas die of a mysterious illness? He died, but it does not tell of his resurrection, obviously. This is what keeps the secret safe of Barnabas being a vampire, of Barnabas dying and resurrecting. Joshua is too proud of a man to admit his son just up and died of a mysterious illness. Well, again, Joshua didn't know either. Joshua did find out Barnabas was a vampire, but not till well after this was written. So, in fairness to Joshua, I will be fair to Joshua here. I've always been fair to Joshua, though he hasn't been fair to other people, fictionally, of course. So Barnabas is taking a risk by simply meeting Elizabeth. I mean, and that's not his only risk either, as I'm going to get into the employment of Willie Loomis. He's taking a risk by meeting her. Yes, of course, he looks like the portrait because he is the fucking portrait. The portrait has literally come to life in every way. Jonathan Fritz Barnabas is the man in the portrait. He is the man from 1795. He meets his cousin Elizabeth, his distant cousin in every way. Um, he thanks her for keeping Hollywood the way it is, though he hasn't been literally in it. He has claimed to have seen pictures of it, which she believes. Now you could say she's given him a lot of leeway. Of course, she's given him a lot of leeway. His last name is Collins, not Devlin. Damn it! This really helps the character being a Collins, because when you talk about Collins prestige, that's what it means. That your word will be taken at face value by pretty much every Collins in the house. Unless you're Quentin. Yeah. Unless you're Quentin, right? No, his word gets taken sometimes. But Barnabas's word is taken at face value. They believe that he is this descendant. They believe that he is this offspring. And again, looking like the portrait of the man you're claiming. Again, I'm named after my descendant. Of course you are. you know, but it is a risk he's willing to take. He does. The slip ups are covered up by him by saying, "Oh, I've seen pictures," though he did say about communication wasn't the greatest. So he saw pictures early on until the communication stopped. Is basically what he is implying, and she believes him. Now, to me, one of the bigger risk he takes, and though he needs Willie Loomis, is keeping Willie as an employer, or sorry, employee. Sorry. You can tell I'm back, right? I'm messing up my words. It's okay, right? Don't take yourself too seriously. That's my motto. So, that being said, Willie Loomis is a thief. He also has no problem pulling a knife, especially when he fought Burt Devlin. Willie is not a good man. He harasses the Victoria Winters. He harasses Carolyn Collins Stoddard. Um, he Carolyn pulls Uncle Roger's revolver on him. Good old Uncle Roger's revolver to the rescue, and yes, she would have pulled that trigger. I honestly think Carolyn would have been the best shot in the house if she would ever got to pull the trigger. That in the close range doesn't hurt. There's so many times Carolyn gets to hold the gun in the house, and it's like, God, she's gonna shoot somebody, and no, she doesn't get to pull the trigger. The writers I love when the writers tease that Carolyn's gonna shoot somebody. It's a fun little tease that they pull off greatly. Um, so people find out Willie Loomis is working for Barnabas Collins, and nobody's happy about this. Keep in mind, Elizabeth has now given Barnabas permission to live in the old house. And he's going to fix it up. So Elizabeth finds this out when Victoria Winters goes to the old house and sees that, hey, things are coming along pretty nicely. She sees Willie Loomis is hiding. And she says, "What are you doing here?" And he says, "I work for Mr. Collins." "You work for him?" "Yeah, and you better get out of here right now." John Carlin's reactions are just gold. They're gold. You got to go watch these. But Vicky, who's the first to find out that Willie is working for Barnabas, goes and tells Elizabeth, and basically everybody else finds out about it too, again, because Collinsport's a small town. So Elizabeth isn't happy about this. Vicky isn't necessarily happy about seeing Willie either. Nobody's happy Willie's working for Barnabas. Maybe David, who knows? David seemed to like it. That Miss Johnson, well, Mrs. Johnson liked talking to him, so that's what she tells Jason. I like talking to him sometimes. It's Mrs. Johnson. She likes talking to everybody who has a pulse. Uh, So, as long as she can get information out of you, you're good. So this is no, but in all seriousness, this is Barnabas taking a huge risk here because now somebody has seen Willie. But what is Barnabas going to do? He's once again going to use his prestige as a Collins. Oh, I've got him completely under my control. He obeys everything I tell him. He's harmless. He changed my tire. The fact, if this were Burke Devlin saying this, even right now in this episode, not that he would, because again they had a knife fight, but you get what I'm saying. This would not get taken well. But the fact that it's a Collins and it's our buddy Barnabas saying it, it gets taken easily, pretty easily. Sure, they question him, but he answers the questions very easily. Even with Burke questions him, and he's like, "Oh, he's no problem for me. And if he were, I'd get rid of him. And if he caused any trouble, I'd get rid of him. Not in a way Willie would like. I'm sure they would never find Willie's body, probably. And no, this isn't going to be the only risk he takes. Kidnapping Maggie is, to me, a risk. It's not the biggest. Is that the biggest risk he takes? No. Trusting Julia Hoffman is a risk. And it's a risk Barnabas debates at times when because he tells Willie, "I'm going to kill her." And Willie's like, "Wait, what? You just told me to prepare a room for this." Sean Carr. So again, it's really Julia tells him, "Hey, you're not the only person with that has had a case like this. So there are other sort of cases similar to yours, not quite like yours." So Julia is going to try to cure Barnabas. And again, Barnabas, I've talked about the 1795 risk. To me, Dr. Lane's trusting Dr. Lane risky? Sure. But Barnabas is also being very cautious, too. He's telling Dr. Lane, "Hey, we're dealing with a witch." A witch? Yeah, like here, keep this on you at all times. He wants to give him a witch's medallion. That he gets from Professor Stokes. That they lose. They lose the medallion. Of course they do. One of the biggest risk take to me is 1897. Barnabas takes a lot of risks by trusting Angelique. Um, you know, she agrees to help him. I think right there is one of the boldest. But to me, the boldest he goes before we get to night is once he gets out of that evilness of the Leviathan. I mean, Barnabas. He's a little he's cautious of betraying the Leviathan, but he's also trying to find ways to betray them, and he does. And then they turn him into a vampire. Then he's taking risk. But to me, the most risk I feel he takes is 1970 parallel time because I mean, though there are no real consequences to anything that happens in regular time here, so you can afford to take a lot of risk with this character. I love Barnabas in 1970 parallel time, and some of the things he does is just bold as shit. Um, he goes into Angelique's room. He says, "Let me see the eyes of Angelique. Let me look into the eyes of Angelique." And he's looking at the portrait. It's such a cool scene. And it lets Angelique know she's dealing with a supernatural entity, the Angelique of parallel time. But also again, by the time 1995 rolls around, and Barnabas has seen the destruction of Collinwood when they go back to 1970. He knows what it looks like. He witnesses it happen again in 1970. So his nightmares happened. 1840, he takes every risk imaginable. Again, trusting Angelique again. He lays it all out for her. He goes, "This is what's going on." And, he tells her the truth. And she goes, "Okay, I'll cure you. No charge. No whatever." And he says, "You'll have my gratitude." And it happens. 1840 is about getting rid of Judah Zachary. You also have the Angelique Barnabas love story sort of come to fruition in every way. Um, Barnabas was the ultimate risk taker, and really, it's something I want to see again when they finally decide to bring this character back. Is that risk take? Is the character was just at times Barnabas was so unpredictable at times, even as a character. You never knew what he was going to do, and that's another thing that made the character fun. Um, Jonathan Frid was great. I mean, he's awesome as Barnabas. I can't recommend the original DS enough. It's a great series. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, link to Between the Shadows, the Dark Shadows podcast is going to be in the description box. Go check out their Christine Pierce and Cara Tilly's YouTube channel. And you guys have a good day. Bye.